Why can't people discuss men's issues without it devolving into whataboutism? This happens anytime anyone talks about any particular group's issues. People can't talk about any remotely controversial topics without engaging in whataboutism. Be it men's issues, women's issues, LGBT issues, religious issues, or political issues. It's a defense mechanism for a lot of people. They don't like having to acknowledge that people have important issues that don't apply to them, so they have to talk about their problems too, just to make it about them. Why can't people discuss without it devolving into whataboutism? Thanks to the general political rhetoric since 2015 and a bit of COVID, most discussions of differing viewpoints typically devolve into this. The country as a whole has seemingly become disinterested in facts. When people are malicious, bad faith, or don't want to change or fix a problem, they'll resort to some kind of fallacy, such as changing the subject, goalpost moving, demanding nothing changes unless this other issue isn't fixed as well, personal attacks, pretending it's not a big deal, or whatever else they can. Google fallacy arguments and the CIA Book of Disruption. There's literally groups of people who are paid to do this, to disorganize and slow down any kind of change for the better in society to serve someone's interest. The only way to deal with it is to familiarize yourself with fallacies. Force them to discuss the topic. Call them out if they repeat bad faith behavior, then block them and tell everyone why you blocked them as a warning for others interacting with them. Deplatforming them. If you find yourself in a group or subreddit where you get downvoted trying to talk about the subject, and every replay is basically fallacies trying to get you to respond and get downvoted, you're in a bad faith group and their goal is to do nothing but bring you down, and it's best to leave. An easy way to make one's own problems important is to discredit everybody else's problems. Very frequently those conversations start with, "What about ISMS? We can talk about men's issues, but we have to do it in a way that actually addresses them without comparing them to women." On Reddit, that's almost always how I see it framed. I'm all for talking about toxic masculinity, which is where a lot of this derives. But there's a whole industry of men's rights, people whose goal is not really to talk about men's issue but to trash women. These men have poisoned the well for serious discussion. Because most people are tribalistic. It doesn't matter the group or the subject. For most people it will always boil down to their own team, their own issues and their own worldview. It's how we as humans always have worked and most probably always will. It is of course not helped that corporations and people in power work tirelessly to have everyone else of us focus on our differences and turn our anger towards each other. Tale as old as time. A lot of the organized men's rights movement is just a bunch of anti-feminist trolls, which certainly doesn't help. It's not that many of their arguments aren't real issues, just that they are being presented in bad faith. In this case, these topics are being brought up as "what about ISMS" from the start. So, if someone brings up an issue in good faith, people are immediately suspicious. I don't think it's the only reason for the reactions you are talking about. There are feminists who just want to hate men, too. Every movement has its pockets of chauvinists. These people hamper progress on every front they meddle in. These comments are gold tears of joy. Because solving problems is bad for a lot of industries and grifts. People with lower self-esteem tend to spend more money than people that have healthy self-worth. Thing is, if you are in a men's group, and you're talking about men's issues, nobody will stop you. Hell, they'll encourage you. If you go into a woman's space and talk about how men have it bad, they're, rightfully, going to be annoyed. It would be like going to a soup kitchen and talking about a shortage of caviar. Sure, it is an issue, but comparatively speaking, it's an issue that others can't even understand because they're having bigger, more immediate problems. If you go to a sub like r/menslib and talk about how being a man is hard and the patriarchal system kills men, they will support you and work with you to find solutions. But if you go to r/feminism and do the same, they won't care, because there are bigger problems with the system that affect more people, and are dealing with those issues first. Does it mean you shouldn't deal with those issues? Of course not. But you shouldn't expect people with less privilege to worry about your issues. Because discussion of men's issues sucks right now. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. Men's advocates are fairly good at identifying problems but awful at proposing solutions. Awareness is only the first step. You have to do something with it to make a change. Their movement also strangely preoccupied with the ways men are harmed by women, such as in divorce, paternity fraud, and domestic violence. Meanwhile, feminist criticism has begun shifting away from this gender war POV into more systemic critiques of patriarchy and masculinity, as well as acknowledging same-sex rape and DV as valid issues. For example, many third and fourth wave feminists now argue against sex-exclusive definitions of rape that second-wave feminists were in favor of. Men's advocacy is also rarely intersectional. Black and Latin men being racially profiled and disproportionately arrested, incarcerated is a sex-based issue as well as an issue of race and justice. Trans men face a double bind between being legally recognized as men and having access to services that address female medical needs. Because more men than women see combat as soldiers, issues related to veterans and the disabilities they're often discharged with are men's issues too. All this and more makes these discussions as fruitless as they are cringe. You just know people that can't for some reason. I'd say you are keeping bad company. You should lean away from the tone policing and stop engaging with people who fight you on this. Might as well ask why we can't just talk about mental health issues and family issues without creating more of a divide. Why does gender matter when trying to help people, lonely, depressed people? Why does it matter what your gender is when the family is broken? The kids suffer no matter what gender they are. Not to illustrate your point, but you do realize that every time women's issues are discussed, we hear, "What about men's suicide rates?" Quote, "Whataboutism is common everywhere. The reason you may be more attuned to it when it comes to men's issues is because men's issues tend to be caused by patriarchy, but are often pushed onto women to fix. Despite the fact that we can't fix it, we'd need massive social change. And women's issues are largely caused by patriarchy, meaning men have a greater power to fix them than women. Often, when we hear about men's issues expressing themselves, showing emotion, and building friendships, there is an undertone that women just need to be nicer to men, and date them and become emotional receptacles for them. That women were the ones who have pushed men to hide emotions. Or that women are the cause of men's depression. Or at least that women live life on easy mode, and that's why we have lower suicide rates. None of which have been proven. Often women will say things like, "What about harassment?" when men talk about dating issues, because male harassment of women is a much bigger issue than women not wanting to date, be emotional receptacles for specific men. The whataboutism isn't necessarily about distracting from the issue but about providing scale. Yes, it is bad that you feel like you can't find a partner. But it is worse that collective male frustrations about lack of relationships are leading to safety problems for women. And that's just one example. I deeply sympathize with the fact that it can feel like no one's paying attention to men's issues. Because they're caused by men, those issues still matter. But don't fall so deep into your own self-pity that you contribute to a deeper problem. Because false dichotomy are easier to argue than real issues when no one is prepared. I don't know how you can answer this question without drawing parallels with other behavior similar to it, but that would be a whataboutism. It's a trick question? I see a lot of people stating that men only bring it up when a woman brings up an issue. This happens a lot the other way around also. And TBH, I don't think it's the man's fault in this a big portion of the time. Because I've been around long enough on here that the women talking about these issues use wording that paint a picture that only women or themselves experience these problems. So OFC, you will be met with a lot of, well, what about, etc. If people are more mindful with what picture they are trying to express, then they wouldn't get this response. BC, in my experience, nearly every time a man has brought up men's issues, it's been to diminish women's struggles and overall is in bad faith. I am sure there's people who genuinely care, but all I am saying is that Google searches for International Men's Day are higher on International Women's Day than any other day.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Ericast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.